music dies down in the background, welcome back again to Pricking the Bubble.
Hang on, I can't hear any music.
Listen carefully, you'll hear the tail end of it. Can you hear it there?
Yeah, I don't know about that music. I'm still a bit... All right, how are you today, Mike?
All right, yes, Dr. Brant Raven, welcome again.
Thank you. So how did our previous podcast, I think, was a little bit controversial.
A bit controversial. We got a bit carried away in certain areas.
Yep.
But that's good. I think that's good.
But I think we got some pretty good comments on the audio of that. So we need to really thank. Who do we need to thank for that?
Mum, Dad, little Jimmy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our good mate Peter.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good. Yes, Peter, our audio expert. Occasional special comments.
Yes, and our information researcher.
Yes, the database, you could say.
Wonderful.
Now, after last week's violently heavy episode, I figured we'd have a look at something else. It's a bit closer to home. You and I, as we've discussed in part, we haven't discussed it, we just have.
Yes.
We are Star Wars collectors of various...
hang on,
items.
We've done this episode.
We've done this as a trial episode.
Yes.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Did we not publish that?
No, we didn't. But I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why we didn't, because this one's going to be better. Anyway, so what I wanted to discuss today is specifically,
yes,
and it can relate to anyone's collections. What's going to happen to them once we bite the dust? Because we I hate to break it to you, we will die one day. So don't laugh over there. That's very sad and upsetting. And what happens to our collection? So I've got a reasonably big Star Wars collection.
Nerd.
I know. It's
not the sort of thing I'd be collecting.
Yeah, definitely not. And I thought to myself a couple of months back, what is going to happen to this when I die? And sure, my wife's a Star Wars collector as well, but she'll die as well, which will mean that all the stuff we have that we've treasured and enjoyed will be left to our non-Star Wars interested child. She doesn't give a flying whatever it is about anything to do with Star Wars. Now, do you want to go and see the next Star Wars film? No, I don't. Excellent. Who are you again? You're not related to me. So,
I've met your girl, and she's absolutely lovely.
She's
and
lovely, but has no interest in Star Wars whatsoever.
Absolutely gorgeous mind. She really does. IQ, so yeah, she does.
Yes.
And you know what? Even though I love Star Wars, I do, and I love collecting things. I love that she doesn't love it.
Yeah, well, that's fine. As I said to her at the time, that's fine. If you don't like it,
and my own
go to your
girl,
room. No, I didn't say that.
Yeah, go to your room. My own girl probably won't like it, and she knows. My little one knows that I do like it. But yeah,
tell us about the slippers you're currently wearing.
Yeah, well. They warm my feet.
Very good.
No, but look, in all seriousness, yeah, look, it's a good question. What will happen to our collections? But, I guess I've pondered on this many, many times, and I've come to the point where I think, why do we even need to ask the question? Why is it an important question? Are we discussing this in general terms?
Well, I guess we are. I mean, I started off with Star Wars because that's what you and I just happen to collect. But it could be any collection. Maybe it could be some porcelain items, or I know my mother-in-law used to collect owls, little owl figurines.
Oh yeah.
And I have to admit, a little bit like Peter and I were discussing about porcelain items before, I do enjoy thinking about the smashing noise that they might make as they land on the floor. But that's just me. The question I guess I have is, are we enjoying these things? So it's different for someone who collects Star Wars in a way, because a lot of Star Wars is more of an addiction than a hobby for me anyway. And so a lot of the things are in boxes. So they sit in the boxes, and I think to myself, yes, I have that. But it's in a frickin' box. I'm not looking at it. I used to have them on display in a room, but now that room's a craft room.
So in part, are you asking why you even bother collection?
What is their current?
Why even bother collecting?
Yeah, what is their current value? What is their worth? If my enjoyment is just knowing that they're sitting in a box in the other room, that's not quite the same as looking at it, having a painting on the wall and saying, oh, well, every time I walk into this room, I can see this lovely painting. What if they were all sitting in the shed? What if my paintings were all in the shed? So should I be trying to realise the value of these things while I'm alive?
Yes.
Or am I storing them up as something to pass on to my child who doesn't care about it?
If you're not enjoying them now while you are living, you are a complete knob.
So it's all right. Well, we've established that. But having said that, I think of my action figure, a blue snaggletooth.
Yes.
Blue snaggletooth.
Yeah.
It's sitting in the box.
Yes.
But I still enjoy knowing that I have it.
Well,
Is
okay.
it like Schrodinger's cat, though? Is it?
If I open it up, is it there? Or is it...
There we go. There we go.
Oh,
Is it
Schrodinger's
there or not?
snaggletooth. Well, that's an interesting question.
No, but look,
Could you just have a box with Star Wars stuff inside?
And whether
just
it's in there or not, that
enjoy
doesn't
that
matter.
box?
Effectively, that's what it is, because it says what each collection is. It says which set of things is in a particular box. I don't open the box. Maybe they've already been thrown out. Maybe I'm coveting boxes in the corner, thinking, oh, I could go and open them, but I don't, and so that's okay.
The bottom line is the bottom.
What a shitty revelation! I'm really upset now.
If you want to look at things in a very fundamental way,
I
right?
do. That's why we're
the
here.
objects that you've got, be they part of a collection or not,
Yep.
have some sort of monetary value.
Well,
Right? And some of those items are going to have a large monetary value. Some of them are not going to have a large monetary value.
Yep.
Right? So, because they've got a monetary value, the size of that value depends on the laws of supply and demand.
Right.
Right? So, when you die and your little one inherits your items...
hopefully she's an old woman by that
Right,
time,
well,
but yes.
when she inherits your items,
Yes.
the items that you have will have a monetary value, and she'll either be able to sell them for a large amount of money or not sell them for a large amount of money, depending on the laws of demand and supply.
You're familiar with those cartoons where you see people shoveling coal into a train?
Yes.
And it makes the furnace grow. That's what I suspect will be happening with my collection.
And I suspect that will happen with a lot of our collections. I myself have a large collection of many eclectic things.
Yes.
Right? And
Yours are mostly paper-based, aren't they?
yeah, well, my
More open to being lit on fire.
more carboniferous. that's correct. So
This new house you're building, there's going to be a big fireplace in there, isn't it?
well, there might be. There's going to be a couple, absolutely.
Very nice.
We shall celebrate the opening of the house.
Past the kindling,
Right.
that box with Star Wars written on
That's
the side
right.
of it.
That's right. And I don't need a bunch of sticks.
That's right.
I will need the... No, but in all seriousness, look, my own collection of things, if I look at Star Wars, unlike you and a lot of other people, my own collection is very paper-based and it's very academic-based. It's all books and articles that have been written on the subject and the topics and the various, breaking down of characters and the themes and the stories, and that's what I enjoy.
Mine are little plastic toys.
The little toys themselves, and I've seen not all, but certainly some of your collection, and I've seen many other people's collections. And some of those collections look fantastic. I mean,
yes.
they as a visual thing, as a visual
And
representation.
I've always said that's why I'm one of these people who keeps them in the packets, because for me, it's not about playing with the toys, it's about the visual representation.
Well, I remember the first time walking into your room and your packets were on the wall and you had them all organised, and they looked absolutely freaking amazing. I have to tell you, they looked amazing. Now, it didn't make me want to rush out and buy things, and it didn't make me want to collect those things, but for what you had, they looked amazing. And I remember visiting people in the US when I lived in the US and seeing some of their collections, and their collections looked absolutely fantastic as well. And the same as when I visited people in the UK, having a look at some of their collections. Amazing. The one thing I would say is that people who collect items related to say something like Star Wars, their collections tend to be very homogenous. They're almost the same, and that really comes down to people being able to go into a store and buying something off a shelf, and there it is.
Yeah.
My own collection.
You hunt for your things.
Well, I've got a hunt for all the academic material, and now certainly being online, and I've been hunting for my academic material since '77.
How old were you back in 77?
Well-
You must have been 1 or 2, I'm guessing.
Well, I must have been. I'm not
Yes.
going to say what my age is,
Very
but
good.
yeah, I must
Not
have been.
enough fingers in the room. Keep going.
That's right.
Yeah.
But no. Look, I was at an age where I could hunt for things, and of
Mm.
course, the internet has changed the way you hunt for things.
Mm.
And even if you collect little plastic toys, the internet has changed the way you hunt for those things as well.
Mm.
And dare I say, the internet's actually changed the hunting for the worse, right? For the worse,
It's too easy to get things now.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember I was there when you bought your blue snaggletooth.
Yes.
I was there.
Yes.
I was there when you made that purchase.
I made the dash down to the teller machine.
and I remember how excited you were.
I was
in
excited.
in being able to find that object.
I was like a kid in a candy
Right,
store.
and that's and in terms of a collection, that's where the value is, right?
Yes.
That's where your value comes from.
Was I living in the moment, though?
Well,
Because
you were living in that moment, and but here we are talking about it, and now you're living that moment again. And I
That's
think-
true.
Is it important to have a story about how you acquired each?
I think it is.
I think it is.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
think
do. I
that
think
adds
it
to
is.
But that is also, though, very personal. I mean, I can talk to you about the story. I collected some action figures once from a guy who was dying.
Yes.
And he put them on and he said, my family, and this is exactly about this topic, my family doesn't care about Star Wars. They're just going to sell these things off for the cheapest price to get rid of them. They're not going to go to the trouble. I would like them to go to a home
Right.
where someone is a Star Wars collector and values the items.
Right.
And to me, there's a story. That's his story, but it's also now part of my story.
Part of your story.
And so I find that's interesting.
How fucking awesome is that story? That
And I
is
did, and I was able to reassure this guy. I said they're going to a good home. They're going, they'll be put on the wall and respect. In fact, they're in the box now. It doesn't matter. He's dead. But they, I gave him something that he probably enjoyed, or at least respected.
No, but
was a level of,
you see that
I'm on the same wavelength as you.
You see, and look, this is what's wonderful. You are now telling that story to the world. Hopefully, right? The world's listening in on that story.
Hi, Mum.
And hopefully, because this is on the internet, the story survives.
Yes.
And that's what's wonderful about it. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful story. And I'm really, really glad that you had that experience. I've had a similar experience even recently where, so I collect video games and being a technologist, I love, I cannot possibly put into words my love for old technology, my love for electronics, my love for old computers, old video games.
Or as you said at the time, technology and video games, they're no longer old when you were a child.
That's right.
They were emerging.
That's right. And I love it all. I cannot even put into words. And I've got audio gear, I've got record players, I've got tape players. And I absolutely love it all. I love mucking around with it. I love putting
So you
it
actually
together.
play with them. You do stuff with them.
I
Not play,
do.
but you know what I mean.
Well,
You
I do.
tinker.
Yeah, of course I do. Okay. Of course I do. Not only do I tinker, I often improve and repair them, and whenever I can do anything like that, I do. I mean, I would love to sit there and make videos. I would love to sit there and talk about them all day if I could. And of course, there are platforms like this, I suppose, that allow us to do this. But I don't do it. But I love all that technology. I love it all, and I love the things related to it. I love the maths behind it. So therefore I've got audio related mathematics books. I love all of that stuff. It's all so wonderfully connected.
So you're still having value. You're not having the Schrodinger's cat. You are still having value of these things now because you are using them.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
I use them. I use the things that I have now in a very sparing way. So I might attach an amplifier to my computer, a computer which I use all the time. Okay, so I might attach an amplifier or a VU meter, or I might attach some other frequency display to my... Do I need a frequency display on my computer? Of course I don't. I don't need that, but I do it because it's something that I can do and it's something that I enjoy. I do it now, but going forward, I want to do it even more. I don't want to... It's not something that I want to stop doing. Okay,
I do remember when the internet was, well, we'll say in its infancy, maybe 15 years ago, one of your quotes to me was, just plug me in.
yeah, absolutely.
And yes, it's the gathering. I think you're more about the gathering of the knowledge, and
I absolutely love it. And
yeah.
and again, like I said, my Star Wars collection is largely academic. One of my greatest loves and hopes would be to contain all of that knowledge into a database and have that on the internet for people to use, because something like Star Wars, in my view, is very, very important from a storytelling perspective. It's a story, it's a human thing. Yes, a lot of people are going to look at that and say, oh, how geeky, oh, how wonderfully geeky. Well, okay, maybe it is. I don't know if it is or isn't. And it's sort of irrelevant to me what people think in that way. What I find important about it is that it tells a story, and it's a story that is a very human story. It's a story that's been told for thousands of years and will be told for thousands of more years in different ways, in different iterations. That's what I find most fascinating. And for me, collecting information and collecting a database of that information is what's wonderful. And I do have that database, and I do try and maintain it and put it together. It's not out there, but I need to get it out there. What will happen when I die with all that information? That's the real thing that we're talking about. What will happen when I die? I don't know. And I'm not sure that I can really care about what will happen.
But as part of the caring factor, I mean, you clearly care about the stuff that you've collected.
Yeah, I do.
Shouldn't you then put into place some sort of request, or do you just don't care at the end when you die?
Well,
when you die, it's done, and it doesn't matter.
If there was a way that I could donate the material that I have to some sort of entity that will maintain that material, then yes, I would, and I would ask that to be donated on my deathbed. But there is no such place. I mean, I don't think there's anyone that's interested. Is there going to be anyone that's interested in your Star Wars collection? I don't think so.
I think it's about passing that stuff on, as you've said, to a certain extent. It's like that guy passed it on to me. Well, he sold it to me, but he passed it on to me. So he was dying, pass it on. I've got it. If I go to die or something happens, I can pass it on to someone else.
Right.
But it's also, some of those things are worth a little bit of money for me. And I have sold some stuff recently. It's helping fund a holiday. That's fine. I still see that as some value, because I'm getting back more than I paid for it, which is always pleasant. It's allowing me to do something.
The things that you're selling, I know you're not selling anything that has a meaning for you.
No, and that's right. So there's a lot of stuff that has either possibly been given to me, or things that I have acquired just cause. But so the other stuff, there is a nostalgia element attached to a lot of it. And it's a lot harder to get rid of things like that. That's why we have our houses with photos, or why we have other things in our collections, or just about the house, that have a meaning, as we said before, that you can't just flog. You can't get rid of it, because it has a meaning. And when I see my vintage Star Wars figures, I think back to the day when I collected them, when I was a kid and played with them. And it reminds me of a time when, as you once put it, the weight of the world hadn't crushed my spirits.
Right.
You know, it's like going to a movie.
But you still haven't answered the question. You've got your vintage stuff.
Yep.
It's important to you, and I get that. I've always gotten that. What are your plans? What are you going to do? Your child, not interested in that crap.
Yep.
What's she going to do? Are you happy for her to sell it on? Are you happy for her to? Do you want her to keep it as a memory of you and your wife?
Well,
what
I
are you
guess
going to do?
Part of me has a problem with people assigning to an object an emotion with respect to a person, because that's how you hoard things and never sell things and never get rid of things. So I don't want her to associate with me. I don't want her to pick up this blue snaggletooth and say, "Oh, this reminds me of Dad." No, I don't want that. She should have her memory. She can have photos of me. That's fine. That's what photos are for. I don't think a plastic toy is the way to go for that. So, having said that, when I bought these things, I didn't buy them as an investment. I bought them as a connection to my childhood. That would be the later reason for buying it. At the time, when I was a child, I got them because I was a child and they were toys and I got to play with them. But there were 100 of the original figures. I wanted to get them all. I was like, So as you get a job, earn money, you can finish a collection, and it makes you, there's a feeling inside that you're like, thank God for that. I've finished the collection. It's good. I can now do what I want and get these extra little bits. That's just for me. That's not for anyone else. There's no way she's going to have any connection of those feelings. She's not going to understand them.
But answer the question.
And then the answer to the question is she can do what she wants with them. If she can get some money from them, fine, that's good. But
happy to pass them.
I'm never going to get money from them. I bought them with the intention of playing with them. Anything I've bought since then was purely to complete that set. I'm not going to see the financial value of those particular things, which is why the ones that I am prepared to get rid of isn't a drama for me, because I don't have that nostalgia associated with them.
So essentially what you're saying is what's going to happen to the collection, you don't really care. You don't really care.
I would be happy if she got some money for it, but that's actually her problem.
You don't really care. You know, and you don't want the collection maintained. But here's the better question.
Yes.
If someone were to set up a society, let's say there was a millionaire out there, right?
Okay.
And that millionaire went and they came to Melbourne, they bought. This has always been my vision.
Yeah.
My
to
vision
be that millionaire, or to be approached by that millionaire?
my vision, and I've honestly had this as a vision. It was to be able to buy a house in Melbourne, a nice house in Melbourne, but to set that house up as a museum.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe somewhere like in Hawthorne, which is a nice suburb in Melbourne, where you can buy a beautiful house, or you used to be able to buy a beautiful house reasonably cheap.
Yeah.
You know, and then take that house and set it up as a museum. And there's absolutely no reason why Australia, Melbourne, shouldn't have a museum dedicated to, say, science fiction, or you know, there's a lot of interested parties in Melbourne. You know, there's no reason. And if such a facility were to be set up, would you want your child to donate your items to that facility?
Look, I remember driving to work years and years ago, and I would always pass this big warehouse, and I would think to myself, how good would it be to have all my stuff in there? Anyone else can put their stuff in there, and it's just a thing. But then at the same time, I think, it'd be a real shit if it burnt down. But
well, of course it would be a shit. But that's like anything.
Yeah, I know.
It would be a shit if any museum burnt down.
But maybe that was... well, that's true. That may have just been my brain saying, yeah, don't do that. You can keep them. It's fine. So, you know,
I don't think anyone's suggesting that you shouldn't keep them.
Yeah. But would I be open to that? Yeah, sure. But I don't think I have anything that is particularly rare or valuable.
No, that's true. But there's going to be the guy that doesn't want their collection donated.
Yep.
There's going to be the guy that wants to sell their collection before they die to realise the value.
If there's 50,
and then there's going to be the guy who wants to hold on to it until his deathbed, and then maybe
be buried with it.
And the same thing applies to various collections. You know, the collection of my audio stuff. There's nothing special about my audio gear. You know what? With respect to my audio stuff, I don't really care. I enjoy mucking around with it. When I pass, my child's going to get rid
through
of it
electrocution,
all, right?
probably.
It's going to go out to hard rubbish, and some other lucky person is going to come by and freak out at all the audio gear, and they're going to bring a van and take it. Right?
Yeah.
Good on them. That's going to be a wonderful thing for me to look at when I'm up in heaven. Right?
Right. You're going there, are you?
That's right.
I'm not sure Israel thinks about that, but there we go.
I'm not gay, so according to him, not going to help.
Okay, that's true.
So, yeah, that's going to be a wonderful thing to do. But you know, for things like, you know, you Star Wars collection, whatever, you know, you can't find those things all the time. And I know there are other people that have got collections of other things.
Well, no, but that's what I was going to say. There may be 50 of me out here in Melbourne who all want to then suddenly contribute to this wonderful museum. And the person who said, I'm going to set up this museum, has 49 spares, and they could flog it off to other collectors. And that's
well, there
fine.
You go.
If it's going to maintain a museum.
I don't know. I don't know what happens with the spares, but I mean, I've always had that as a vision, and you know, I've always had as a vision to have something, especially a gaming museum, a museum of video games and old computers and old.
That would be good. I'd quite enjoy that if it had the controllers everywhere.
There's a guy that actually has set something like that up in Geelong, I think. If my memory serves.
Geelong. Such a long way from here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's set that up, and I don't know how it's set up. I don't know I don't think it's necessarily set up as a good walk-through museum or a tourist destination that I might want to visit. I don't think it's set up in that way. But, I mean, it would be nice to do.
It's interesting you say something like that. There's a place not far from my work, and occasionally I have driven past and it says a tractor museum. And it's just a paddock with some tractors in it. And I think to myself, A, who wants to go to a tractor museum? And B, who wants to go to a tractor museum? But what's probably happened in that is the same thing we're talking about. Some guy's got a whole bunch of freaking tractors. Well, actually, maybe they've just collected them from other people. And maybe, much like you and your audio stuff, they just like tractors and they want other people to enjoy them. I don't know. So that way, the tractors don't go to tractor heaven. They all go to this particular paddock and live on, and people can drive past it and say...
in fact, probably tractor heaven.
Actually, that's a very good point.
Look, I think humans
That'd be
by
a good
their
name for that place, tractor.
Humans by their nature are collectors. I think we collect things. I think what people should collect are memories and experiences. I think that's what's really wonderful about the human condition. But people do collect objects, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I think we shouldn't be hampered by the idea of what's going to happen to my collection when I die. Well, I don't know. What's going to happen to your collection? I got no idea. You know, it's your collection's probably going to go in the bin somewhere.
What are the options realistically?
Well, there aren't any.
Numbered them. From worst to best.
Okay, so first option is you sell it to fund your medical treatment when you die. that could be one option.
Yeah.
Okay. Second option is you want to go on a holiday, and so you sell it because you're not getting the stimulus from it that you used to get, perhaps, and so you can flog it, and that way it does have value, and the value continues, and you create new memories with that holiday. So, in effect,
so your golden C-3PO penis is not offering the stimulus that you once experienced.
Yes, thank you for making this ugly. And so then there's the third one where you just hang on to it forever. And then when you die, you know, I know there used to be a thing in the earlier days of the fan collecting scene where people would say, "Oh, he who dies with the most toys wins." Well, that's a bit shit, really, because you know what it is. It's you're turning something that's meant to be fun into a competition, and it's only a competition.
But I don't think anyone actually meant that, right?
No, I think there were quite a few who did mean that.
I think
they're the
ones.
No, they did. I can name them, but we'd been arrested. So anyway, that's another option. One that you need a really big coffin if you're gonna just throw them all in with me, or maybe a funeral pyre. That could be the way to do it. And you, already dead, are tied to the stake, surrounded by your plastic toys. Woof, up it goes in flames.
Metaphorically, that could be what's happening with a lot of people now that they're being destroyed by their own addiction to collection.
Well,
I know. I'm just thinking. One particular friend of mine felt like it was a big anchor in his life.
Oh, this is interesting.
Yeah, and
this is interesting.
He had some tumultuous things happen in his life, and he felt like he needed to start a new life, but that the collection was always there. So people
are being destroyed by their collections.
He ended up selling almost everything. He kept maybe one or two things and sold everything.
Wow, this is interesting.
And moved to the other side of the country.
Really? So,
and it was a great thing for him.
In what way? Was this the only example?
Oh, it's the closest one to me that I know that people have said, look, I've had this collection, and he had the most magnificent collection I'd seen presented really well.
Was it Star Wars? Or?
Yes,
it was. Someone I know?
Oh, yeah, it'd be someone you know.
There is an element of that. I mean, a lot of the things when I'm selling some of these things, for example, I did sell something that was a small Lego piece recently for $800 or so. Just one piece of Lego. And I thought to myself, that's really good. I'm glad this person's getting what they want.
I'm glad they're getting what they want. I'm glad they're not in this country.
And I'm glad... No, they were. And I'm glad that
they were in this country.
I'm glad I'm getting what I want. But at the same time, I think to myself, I hope that during my collecting time, I never was quite beholden to my collecting that I needed to fork out that much money for an individual item.
Yeah.
And I look through and I think back to the blue snaggletooth conversation. Look, that cost me $180 or something, $160.
It was
and
that
was,
that,
how long was that? 10 or 15 years ago.
It was a long time ago. No, it was more than that.
It
would be
back in the 1800s.
No,
maybe?
No, it'd be about 20 odd years ago.
Anyway, it was a little disturbing at the time because I was like,
I remember that.
Shall I not?
No, I remember.
The umming and the ahhing, but that was also $100 and something. This was $820 something for a single Lego piece, and I thought to myself, you need an awful lot more Lego pieces in order to have this as a proper collection.
Now, did that guy buy it because it was Lego, or did he buy it because it was Star Wars?
Probably both. That's the beauty of crossovers. It appeals to a wider audience.
Right. Yeah.
So,
because I thought that piece was a particularly ugly piece.
well, look, you're evil in that respect. You can look at these things and go, because it's not that the academic aspect is not.
Well,
there.
yeah, I mean,
it's
if it,
just a coloured bit of toy.
I would have loved to see the instruction manual, and I'd probably collect the instruction manual for it.
Yeah.
That's what I would.
There was no
do.
instruction manual. When I say a single piece, it was a single piece. No instruction.
No, but
Here it is. Let's put it down.
Okay. So for me, what would be interesting with that single piece, if I were to be researching that, I would be interested in looking at like the design papers who designed it, how did they, what? Let me see the.
Were they
drawings.
rubbing their hands together, thinking,
they were.
"Hey,
they were.
We're making one of these, and we know
but that's what I'd be interested in, right? So from an academic perspective, I think that would be interesting. I'm also interested in the story you're telling, because again, from an academic perspective, that is a fascinating story.
And in effect, part of what we were talking about before was the stories that are developed or created in acquiring these things.
Oh, look, the stories.
There's
are
also
magnificent.
stories in disposing of these things.
Right, absolutely.
Much like that
yes.
poor dead guy.
Yes.
I mean, it might have been a brief story, but hopefully he passed it on to someone else.
Yes.
I have a story now for something I have got rid of. And much like Peter said, I feel better for having got rid of that. Not the least because I got $820, but I also, it's like, something I've got rid of some of my collection.
As you may or may not know, I've got several scrapbooks who were owned by a past Star Wars person
Yep.
That were passed on to another Star Wars person.
Yep.
Of course, I'm avoiding mentioning names.
Yes.
But you know who.
George Lucas. No, it's all right. Okay, carry on.
You know who this person. You guys both know who this person is.
Yes, that's fine. Carry on.
And I acquired those scrapbooks, which honestly,
that's part of your story now.
well, it is. It's part of the story. I consider them to be a really important part from an academic perspective. Sadly, they weren't regarded, they weren't being treated well, or they weren't cherished in any way. And when I acquired them, I honestly felt that it was my role to take these and preserve them, and I still consider that.
I guess there's an element of that with a lot of collecting, is people will buy things in order to restore them, I mean, people do that with cars all the time. They'll see a wreck of a car and they'll think, oh, someone's, I don't mean like a Commodore, I mean like an older car. They'll see it and I think, well, part of the fun will be restoring it. You've probably done things like this, restoring it, getting things back into a visually spectacular. I have a friend who has a Model T Ford,
right?
And I look at that and I think, wow, that looks awesome,
right?
So there is an ongoing collecting it. So he has the story of collecting it or getting it. Now he has the story of restoring it.
Yes.
Now he has the story of dressing up like a 1920s, whatever it is, and drive 1920s. And driving it.
Yes,
those are stories. I've said I would like to go for a drive. I saw his nose turn up, but like, don't touch my car, that sort of thing. So there are stories that are ongoing. There are skills that can be developed. I don't believe I've developed any skills in collecting.
No. I think you'd be actually very surprised. You've probably developed a lot of research skills.
Well, that's true.
You've probably developed a lot of skills for identifying pieces which are good condition, bad condition.
Yeah.
You've probably developed skills for preserving and collecting and cataloguing and categorizing. A lot of those skills you would not even necessarily know. I know for a fact that I've developed a lot of skills in the research that I've done and I was well known for having a lot of these pieces. I had you may or may not know, I had people that would come and give me articles that I had not had or did not know of their existence. I had people around the world, and this is even prior to the internet being. I mean, I was on news groups back in the day acquiring various academic pieces.
I do recall, and I quite enjoy the story you've said, where you gathered a bunch of things in exchange for some moist towelettes.
Yes.
So there's people out there collecting
moist
other
towelettes,
things,
yes,
moist
yeah,
towelettes.
yeah, absolutely.
So you wonder what value, what financial value
Yes.
is that going to have for that
Oh,
person?
I can tell
Are
you
they
what-
just expecting a big picnic one day and a quick? We've all got moist towelettes.
Oh,
Everyone celebrates, and let's have a bit of a.
I can honestly tell you, I used to trade. Oh wow, this is going back. I mean, I used to, prior to the days of the internet.
back when I had hair.
Back when you
Actually,
had
no,
hair.
it was a rabbit. Sorry, go on. That's okay.
Very funny.
Well done.
Prior to the very ancient or early days of the internet, airlines used to publish their schedules in timetables. You could go to a travel agent and say, give me the Qantas timetable. And they would give you a relatively thick book with the Qantas timetable of all their... Well, people collected these freaking things. And I would trade these with a guy in the US. And I would trade airline timetables with a guy in the US. And he would send me newspaper articles from various newspapers around the US.
So how would you feel if you knew that this big pile of plane timetables had fallen over one night and crushed him? I can't.
Well, again, I don't know. I don't know how he maintained it all. I don't know what he did with it.
Well, I guess that's
but
what
he
I was.
absolutely loved it because there were things he just could not get in the US.
Yeah.
There were timetables that he simply could not get, and that I could get here, especially for like regional airlines.
Yeah, yeah.
And he couldn't get them here. He couldn't get them, but I could. And he was more than happy to trade these things.
It's a very specific
Very,
thing to be
very
collecting.
specific.
Isn't
And
it?
there were many cases. There were many cases like this. I remember. For me, it all started in the news groups when I was a lot younger, and I remember like it was yesterday. Amazingly, so for those that don't know, and I'm sure it happens in other countries wherever you're listening from, and hopefully it's all across the world.
Bonjour.
In Melbourne, you could go to a nightclub, and back in the day, you could often get a pass to go to a nightclub, and you would get that pass, and that pass would enable you free entry, and you might even get a free drink, and that was obviously to attract people to the nightclub. And I remember seeing and finding a whole bunch of passes, nightclub passes that would allow free entry. There was a place called it was either called Chevron or the Cadillac Bar.
Chevron, yeah.
But it was a Star Trek night.
Oh yes,
And it had a picture.
that sounds like a lot of fun for those who attend a nightclub. Yes,
It was a picture of the pass.
beam me up. Sorry, go on. I'll just get
The
it.
pass itself had a picture of the Enterprise 1701D.
These are all men at this club. I'm guessing.
Well, I don't know. It was a bit of a sausage fest. But
Okay.
I didn't go to the night
yeah,
itself.
I'm sure
but
you
I-
didn't. Yeah, okay.
But I collected the passes, and
Right.
and I was able to trade these passes on the internet, and they were absolutely hot potatoes back. And then there was another club that
You were selling a false hope there to fanboys around the world,
Well,
thinking that they might get into this nightclub and
I
meet
never
some
did
women.
end up selling anything.
Okay.
I traded them all for other things, but I've still got a lot of these. Well, not a lot. I may have 6 of them left, but there's
Well, we've got our evening set, haven't we?
There's my story there.
Does
right,
the Chevron
related-
even still exist?
No, it doesn't
okay.
exist. It's now a bunch of apartments.
No, I do want to say this other story. I told you this the other time about my friend Dave, who collected football records,
Oh,
so
yes,
Australian
yes.
football records. And part of what he did, he had this huge collection. Again, another reasonably flammable collection of things. He would go around and try and find. I mean, the first thing people do with a football record is tick off who kicks the goals and who kicks the points.
Right. So not being into football,
It's effectively a scoring sheet for you.
I am not a football person at all.
And a goal is a thing that they try to get.
Yeah, that's right. So
I know what a goal is, but it's a. And I know what a footy record is, but I've no idea how people collect it or use it or anything.
Every game has its own cover.
Right. Right.
Has its own clearly because it's different teams playing in each game.
Right.
So you would go along and mark things off. And you'd say, yep, this person kicked on. So what happened was you could collect these things, but also it's a bit like me and my Star Wars collection, but, drawing on it. So if I drew on a card, an action figure card, it means that it's not quite as valuable as it was. It's used. This friend of mine, let's call him a friend, he would go and he would collect...
Well, he was your friend.
He still is.
Nicer guy.
Dave, yes, he's an excellent guy. He would collect these things and he would find ones that didn't, so even if there were pages that were scribbled on, he would find the ones that weren't. He would carefully peel back the staples and create a pristine version of it, which was very good. He's effectively creating value.
Yes.
And he collected these things for his own collection, but he would also collect them for people who were different supporters of different clubs. So he supported one club, one team. Across the other side of the country, people would be collecting for a different one, but they couldn't always come across to this Melbourne, say, when their team was playing here. So they missed out on the record. So it was a thing where there was a lot of interest. Big collecting group. And so he would sell these things back to people, but he also collected his own. And part of his argument at one point was he said, right, I know pretty much all I need to know. I'm interested in the history. I've created a website. I've created a history, again, an online history of, I think I just said the same thing 3 times there, of these football records and the things that I've collected. I don't need to keep them anymore.
Right.
And so he was able to get money, get value from these particular things. He kept the knowledge, but we're coming back full circle to where we began, he's got some financial benefit out of it without losing the nostalgia because he's maintained the nostalgia online.
But what's interesting about that is his intention was never really to make money. Surely he's...
No, I don't think anyone necessarily, unless you're that's the difference between someone who's collecting art or investing in something. I don't think people go along. Oh, well, actually, that's not true. There were people I know who, in the old days, certain people we both know, who would collect 2 of everything because they wanted one to open or one to play with and one to flog later. And if that meant taking one from you when you didn't have one, I needed a second one. That's the way it works. So yeah, there are people who do that. They see it as and that's completely fine and makes sense if they've managed to again realise some value from the things that they've been collecting for the last X number of years. Fantastic.
Yeah, I love the story of Dave. I think that's a great story, and even though I'm not a person that is into footy, and I never will be. I don't think I'll be anyway. But I love that story.
Podcast number 1, everyone, in case you're wondering about that.
I love that story because what he was doing in a lot of ways was very academic. He was really maintaining
his history.
Yeah,
he did it with a lot of the football jumpers and the designs and the small details that change. He has a website that details the changes of the footy jumpers over the years and that kind of stuff.
See, now that's even though I'm not
really
interested in footy, I would be fascinated by that.
Yeah,
I
it's really interesting.
Because, and again,
but he doesn't own those jumpers.
No,
he's just done the research.
Yeah. No, I get that, but that's a very anthropological thing that he's done. Right, it's very, very interesting. And even though I would never be interested in footy, I'd probably still want to visit his website, just because I don't know. There's just something. There's an element of that I find.
Maybe
interesting.
We can put it in the notes for this podcast.
Maybe you should.
What a good idea.
That's a great idea. I like that idea.
One of my greater ideas in the last few minutes.
But I think we're coming on to time, and I think we need to probably wrap it all up.
Yes. Look, it's been interesting. I'm not sure we've necessarily come up with a definite thing, other than we're all going to die.
Well, I don't
nice cheery topic.
Yeah, I don't think we've answered the question, but I think we may have answered the question by saying there really is no answer.
Yeah.
And the answer is a very, very personal thing. Whatever collection you have,
don't force it onto your kids.
Yeah, don't force it onto your kids. Don't force it onto anyone. Enjoy that collection. And if you feel that you need to realise some monetary value for it, go ahead and do that. And yeah, just enjoy what you do. I think that's the best way to put it, really.
No better way to end the podcast than on that note.
Right, and on that note, what do you say, Mike the Llama? I think I'd like to say to our listeners, like, comment, and subscribe.
Yeah, please do. That would be excellent.
That would really help us out, and I hope you enjoy these discussions that we have. Hope we've pricked your bubble.
Yes, we will see you in the next episode. Adios.
Bye for now.